"Get out of the way, old man, you're blocking the view." The young officer's voice cut sharp as a razor's edge, slicing through the festive hum of the Veterans Day parade. Arthur Jenkins, his frail shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare jacket, flinched. He'd only wanted a glimpse of the marching bands, the crisp uniforms a poignant echo of a lifelong past. Now, a snarling police canine strained at its leash, inches from his worn trousers. The officer repeated, "Move, or we'll make you." Arthur stood, a silent statue of forgotten valor, his heart a trapped bird. If you believe true heroes deserve our utmost respect, type honor in the comments. Arthur Jenkins had seen 78 summers. Most lived quietly since he'd traded his combat boots for civilian shoes decades ago. The war had carved lines into his face that time deepened, and his hands, though gnarled with age, still held a certain steadiness. Today, like every Veterans Day, he was drawn to the Paretta pilgrimage to the ghosts of his youth. His old unit, the stalwart 3rd, rarely marched anymore, its surviving members thinned by the relentless march of years. Still, he hoped. He carried a small, folded piece of fabric in his boquita, fragment of his old uniform, its olive drab faded almost to gray. A tangible link to a time when he was more than just an old man in the crowd. He clutched it now, seeking its familiar comfort against the biting wind and the even colder dismissal. He tried to edge closer to the front, past the temporary barriers, hoping for a clearer view down the avenue. The crowd was thick, a sea of faces bright with patriotic cheer. Arthur, small and unassuming, was easily overlooked toward. Worse, seen as an obstruction, that's when Officer Miller Young, an impressive display of fresh uniform and officious zeals, "Him, sir, you need to stay behind the barrier," Miller called out, his tone already impatient. Arthur, his hearing not what it once was, murmured, "Pardon, son." Officer Davies, Miller's partner, equally young and eager to assert authority, swaggered over. He said, "Stay back, Grandpa. Can't you hear?" Davies smirked, nudging Miller. Arthur's quiet explanation, "Just trying to see my old unit," was swallowed by their condescension. "Everyone's got a story, old-timer. Rules are rules," Miller retorted, gesturing sharply with his gloved hand. The sting of their disrespect was sharper than the November air. He wasn't just Grandpa or Ultimer. He was Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, a man who had faced down death for the very freedoms this parade celebrated. But his protests were whispers against their booming disdain. Arthur, unaccustomed to confrontation, felt a familiar wariness settle over him. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He simply wanted to remember. He tried again. "Please, just a moment," but Miller's patience had snapped. "That's enough. You're creating a disturbance." Davies, sensing his partner's rising anger, chimed in. "Look at him, probably drunk or lost. Sir, you need to move now, or we'll escort you out." But Arthur's eyes, though clouded by age, held a flicker of the fire that had once burned so brightly. He stood his ground not defiantly, but with a quiet, unyielding dignity that seemed to irritate the officers further. "I am not drunk," he stated, his voice low but firm. "And I am not lost," Miller scoffed. "Yeah, right. Davies, maybe. Max can persuade him." He jerked his head toward the sleek, formidable canine unit waiting with another handler nearby. Davies grinned. "Good idea." Nothing like a little canine encouragement to clear the way. The casual cruelty of their decision hung heavy in the air. Dark cloud over the day's solemn celebrations, the canine officer, a stern-faced man named Henderson, brought Max forward. The German Shepherd was a magnificent animal, all coiled muscle and alert intelligence, its barks sharp and intimidating. Max lunged toward Arthur, teeth bared in a trained display of aggression. The crowd gasped, some shrinking back. Arthur didn't flinch. He simply stood, his gaze fixed on the approaching dog, a strange calmness settling over him. He'd faced far worse than a barking dog in his day. As Max reached him, its barks echoing off the nearby buildings, the dog suddenly faltered. Its nose twitched, sniffing intently at the pocket of Arthur's old jacket, the pocket where the faded, precious scrap of his old uniform lay hidden. The growling stopped abruptly. Max whined, a low, confused sound deep in its throat. Then, to the utter astonishment of the officers and onlookers, the highly trained police dog sat down, its tail giving a tentative thump on the pavement. It looked up at Arthur, then at Henderson, its intelligent eyes filled with an almost human puzzlement. Max then nudged Arthur's hand gently with its wet nose. "What in the blazes?" Miller exclaimed, his face a mask of disbelief. "Henderson, what's wrong with your mutt? Get him on his feet." Davies stared, equally dumbfounded. Never seen Max do that before. He's usually all business. Henderson, too, was baffled, tugging lightly on the leash. "Max, heel, what is it, boy?" But Max remained seated, looking up at Arthur with an expression that could only be described as respectful. The dog let out another soft whine, nudging Arthur's leg again, as if seeking reassurance. The tension in the air shifted from aggression to a stunned, uneasy silence. The canine's inexplicable behavior had thrown a wrench into the officer's confident assertion of authority. The crowd murmured their initial fear. It was the situation, the dog's strange deference. This pause, this moment of unexpected stillness, created an opening, a new voice crisp, an authoritative cut through the bewildered silence. Ringing with command, "Officer, what is the meaning of this spectacle?" All heads turned. Striding toward them was a figure of undeniable presence, General Peterson, a 3-star general. His uniform was immaculate, his chest adorned with rows of ribbons that spoke of a long and distinguished career. He was in town for the parade, guest of honor. His sharp eyes swept over the scene. The cowering old man, the confused K9, the flustered young officers. "I asked a question, Officer Miller," General Peterson repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Miller visibly paled, snapping to attention. "Sir, this man, he was obstructing the parade route, refusing to move. We were assisting him, sir." Peterson's gaze shifted to Arthur, lingering for a moment on the old man's worn face, his shabby clothes. Then his eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable within them. He noticed the way Arthur stood, even under duressed shoulders subtly squared, a certain alignment that spoke of old disciplines. His gaze then fell to Arthur's hand, which instinctively clutched the pocket containing the fabric scrap. "May I see what you have there, sir?" Peterson asked, his tone surprisingly gentle toward Arthur. Slowly, his trembling fingers fumbling with the button, Arthur pulled out the small, tattered square of olive-drab fabric. He held it out. General Peterson took it, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he turned it over in his gloved fingers. Suddenly, recognition sharp and profound blazed in his eyes. He looked from the fabric to Arthur's face, truly seeing him for the first time. This insignia," Peterson breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "This is from the stalwart 3rd. I'd know it anywhere." He looked directly at Arthur. "Sergeant Jenkins, Arthur Jenkins from Anzio, the one they called the Rock." Arthur Jenkins, the forgotten old man, simply nodded. A single tear finally escaped, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. Peterson's composure nearly broke. He turned to the stunned officers, to the silent crowd. "This man," his voice rang out, clear and strong, "this man you were about to harass with a dog is Sergeant Arthur Jenkins. 40 years ago, on a god-forsaken hill in Italy, outnumbered and outgunned, Sergeant Jenkins held the line. He saved his entire platoon. He saved me." The general's hand went to his own chest, indicating a faint scar barely visible beneath his ribbons. "I was a young lieutenant, then scared out of my wits. He pulled me from enemy fire." The silence that followed was profound. Officer Miller and Officer Davies looked as if they'd been struck by lightning, their faces drained of color, arrogance, replaced by a dawning, horrified shame. General Peterson fixed them with a glare that could freeze fire. "This man is a hero of the highest order. He has earned more respect in one day of his service than you two have shown in your entire careers. He is the reason you stand here freely today in those uniforms you so casually disgrace." He then turned back to Arthur in a gesture that stunned the entire crowd. General Peterson, the 3-star general, snapped to attention and delivered a crisp, perfect salute to the old man in the threadbare jacket. "Sergeant Jenkins," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears, "it is an honor." The crowd, which had been watching in stunned silence, erupted not in jeers for the officers, but in a wave of applause and murmurs of awe for Arthur. People pressed forward, no longer seeing a nuisance but a legend in their midst. The K9, Max, who had remained seated patiently, now rose and licked Arthur's offered hand, tail wagging as if in agreement. The parade officials, quickly appraised of the situation, rushed forward, apologies tumbling from their lips. Arthur Jenkins was no longer an obstruction. He was the guest of honor. He was escorted to a seat on the main viewing platform right beside General Peterson. Officers Miller and Davies, utterly humbled, approached Arthur and deeply felt. "Sir Sergeant Jenkins, we are so sorry. We didn't know," Miller stammered, his earlier bravado completely gone. Arthur, a man of few words but immense grace, simply nodded. "It's all right, son. Just remember sometimes, the oldest books have the most important stories." The rest of the parade was a blur for Arthur, but a warm, affirming one. He watched the young soldiers march by, their faces so earnest, and for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. He felt respected. The incident didn't just end with apologies. General Peterson ensured the local police department reviewed its community interaction protocols, emphasizing de-escalation and respect, especially for their aging veterans. The story of the canine who recognized a hero's scent became a local legend, a reminder that true valor leaves an indelible mark, sometimes in ways we least expect. Never judge a person by their appearance, for beneath a worn coat may beat the heart of a lion. The quietest souls often carry the loudest histories of courage. Arthur continued to attend the Veterans Day Parade every year after that's, always given a place of honor, always with Max the canine making a special detour to greet him. Of a society is how it treats those who have served. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that remind us of the enduring power of honor and respect. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.